In this audio, I'll introduce the energy gauge tool, explain how it works, and then talk you through it step by step. Now, you can use this energy gauge technique to clear from your system emotions and emotional energy that is not yours, and that helps you reset your emotional space. If you're a sensitive person, you may be able to attune very closely to other people's emotional states. And some of us may have learned to do this as kids, and we do it automatically without even realizing it. The trouble is, when you overly attune to other people's emotions, you can lose touch with your own emotions, which means you lose touch with your own desires and needs. And this can cause some dysregulation in your natural inner state. And that's why we can start to experience confusion, inner conflicts, difficulty with decisions, even physical fatigue and physical and emotional overwhelm. So the energy gauge tool can be useful for everyone, but especially if you have a tendency to over-attune to others and under-attune or turn down your own internal needs and intuitions. So what is it? This is a visualization tool. It's usually done with your eyes closed. And you'll picture in your mind's eye an image of a gauge that represents 0 to 100%. You don't need any particular experience to do this. If you can picture a sunset or what you had for dinner last night, you're able to use this tool. If you're not a person who visualizes at all, some people just don't have a visual aspect to in their internal mind, you can modify the tool to sense the percentage a different way. You can, if you're very auditory, you can maybe hear the percentage as a word, or you can just from direct knowing get a sense of the percentage. So you can modify the process to match the way your internal perception may work best. Okay, so to prepare to do the exercise, first you want to choose the type of gauge you're going to use. I like to use a gauge that's kind of like an old-time gas gauge, where 0 is on the left, 100% is on the right, and there's a needle in between. It's kind of shaped like a fan, and the needle moves from 0, moves back and forth. You might also use a gauge that's more like a temperature thermometer with 0 at the bottom, 100 at the top, and the amount goes up and down. So first, decide what type of gauge you want to use. Then choose a person in your life that you suspect is influencing your state of being. Anyone that you're close to will be influencing your state of being. So you probably have plenty of people to choose from, but obvious ones might be your spouse, a family member, a friend, or a coworker that you work closely with. So just choose one person for this first exercise. And once you have that chosen, I'm going to walk you through it. So the first step is to just refocus your attention and bring your attention inside. Right? So just taking a couple of breaths, and as you're ready, you can close your eyes. And feel your body heavy, resting on the surface of whatever you're sitting on or laying on, and just begin to relax. Now, in your mind's eye, just conjure up an image of a gauge that goes from 0 to 100%. And just see that gauge forming clearly in your mind's eye. Now, once you have that image, you're going to program that gauge or set the gauge to represent the percentage of your thoughts and emotions that are actually yours. So the gauge represents how much of what you're feeling right now is coming from your energy. And so go ahead and set that gauge to show that and see the needle move to a certain percentage and get a reading on that percentage. Now the first reading you get is usually the most accurate. So avoid, second guessing it. And you're going to want to observe this reading as neutrally as possible without judging the percentage, even if it's low. We're not trying to, there's no right or wrong here. What we're trying to do is get good information about what is actually happening. So get that reading. Now once you have that, go ahead and on your screen there that you're looking at in your mind's eye, go ahead and move that gauge over to the left. And then on the right-hand side, put up a second identical gauge right next to it. But this one is going to be for the other person. And you're going to program this gauge to represent how much of what you are feeling right now is coming from that person's energy and not yours. And go ahead and let that needle move and get a reading on that percentage. Now just take a moment once you have those two gauges and observe those two readings. Get that information, and now the next step is to begin to actually move those needles so that more of your energy is in your space and less of their energy is influencing you. So your gauge on the left, the needle's going up, and their gauge on the right, the needle's going down. There's no need to force this. Just set the intention to see the gauges change. And as the other person's gauge goes down, your gauge should naturally go up. And you can do this until the other person's gauge ideally gets down to 0% and your gauge is filled up. Now, you may not get all the way to 100% with yours or 0% with theirs, but it should start to go in that direction. So just set the intention to move those gauges and let them move. Now, as this gauge of the other person's energy goes down, you are clearing out the other person's emotions from your body, from your system. And your body is going to notice this. So you might notice physiological changes. You might yawn spontaneously. You might sigh. You might even start burping. Or you might have other relaxation type shifts in your body. You might get the urge to make a sound or move. If someone's energy was really dominating your system and it moves out, you might actually feel a surge, an empowering surge of anger or relief as you reclaim your space. And this is very normal. So let any emotions or sensations that are coming flow through as part of this process of release. And just see these physical reactions, if you have them, as validations of what you're doing that's working. Your body's getting relief and nourishment as other people's energy clears out and yours replenishes, moves back in. Now, if you're noticing having trouble, the gauges aren't moving or not moving very much, there's a few things you can do. One of the first things you can do is to actually ground the gauges. So just visualizing a grounding mechanism on the gauges. Maybe you connect them to a tree trunk that goes down into the earth, maybe a waterfall. And setting the intention that any stuck energy in those gauges can begin to flow out and be transmuted and returned back to its natural state. So that can be super helpful. You also just want to check in with your heart. Is there any resistance? Is there any judgment happening here? You might just set the intention to open your heart and give yourself and the other person the benefit of the doubt that you're both doing the best you can. And move toward acceptance and forgiveness of yourself and the other person, and general acceptance of the situation without blaming, and with just the general truth that you're doing this exercise because you know everyone is better off when we each have access to our own clarity of emotions. And that your intention is just to find more clarity, find more well-being. And as you do this, you might also get intuitive insights about why or how this energy is getting into your field and why you draw it in. What beliefs are you holding about how you must relate to this person? And you can see what needs to be released, what needs to be addressed, what the next steps might be. So after you apply one or more of those things, you might re-invite the gauge to shift again and see if you can move those needles in the direction of your energy, your emotions being indicated in your space, more toward 100%. Now, when you've completed the exercise, it's important to release the gauges and clear your mind's eye. So you can do this several ways. You might just allow the gauges to dissolve into thin air. You might erase them like with an eraser on a chalkboard, or you could blow them up like a firework. But just go ahead and clear those out of your mind's eye. And then just take a moment to come back to the heart and thank yourself for taking the time to complete this process and care for yourself in this way. Once you get the hang of this tool, this exercise, it can be done very quickly, in less than a minute even. You can do that anytime during the day. As you are learning to do it, or if you are doing it for issues or relationships that are a little bit more, a little bit stickier or long-standing, you can set aside dedicated time to do it as a longer process. And so you can take your time and open to getting insights about the dynamic. And you can do this as often as you need to. When you're first starting, and especially if you're working through a pattern, you might check in with these gauges, multiple times a day, and just continue working that energy and seeing how that affects you, seeing how it impacts the way you feel. So do practice this, and I hope very much that this tool benefits you.